And here, Julie,
Here.
Lynn,
Here.
Marissa,
Here.
Andrew, here, Candy.
Here.
And Kathleen is not with us, except for she will be joining.
Kathleen just joined us a few seconds ago, and she'll listen.
Perfect.
I can't.
All right. Any public comments? I don't think so. No one wants to say anything to us today? All right, make it quick. Approval of. No. Approval of minutes for April 3rd. Thank you, sir.
I make a motion that we table the minutes.
All right, second. All in favor? All right, that'll be tabled until next meeting. Minutes for June 5th. Did you get a chance to look through those? Lots of errors.
Junior numbers.
Do what?
Junior numbers and planning zone.
Are you talking about the minutes from that meeting?
Oh, so you're showing that. Sorry.
Yeah, we're just approving that, so I just need a.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
All right, Marissa, next one, do a second.
I second it.
All in favor? All right, those are approved, and then the last one's gonna be the minutes for the second meeting on the 12th.
And Candace, I don't know where I picked up one, so that needs a correction. Are you Candace or how do you want? How do you have you? Candy, yes, I had you, I don't know where I.
Well, actually,
Maybe it was off the resume. Okay. That is-
Okay, so we need to change Candy's name on the minutes to be corrected. So with that change, so pretty good with these. Motion. And then
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
get a second.
I second.
All right, all fair. All right, passes. All right, the last thing we're going to talk about is sign ordinance stuff. So I know we've talked about this a little bit, but I thought it would be relevant for us to look at it. I know when this was originally put into place, it was kind of guided from some other cities, not really taking a whole lot of consideration into our town as a whole. So I wanted everybody to have a chance to look around town, see the sign you like, don't like, kind of read through the ordinance and kind of get y'all's thoughts. So where's everybody at on this one?
Well, my thought's probably more of a comment is that we spent a whole lot of money and time last year for the overlay zoning. So my question is, why doesn't that come back for approval? Because to do one-off ordinances, in my mind, when we're gonna do a huge overlay, we should partner with that overlay. In other words, whatever we pass in the sign ordinance isn't gonna impact most of the town.
So to my understanding, that is kind of on hold right now, not a whole lot of appetite in city council for it, but I think they're talking about that tomorrow night. But to my understanding is that's not making a whole lot of progress at the current moment. Yes, I agree with you that the 281 overlay would. So my understanding is, yes, that might kind of take care of most of these things, but until then, I think it's at least worth talking about. If you don't feel that it is, then we don't need to.
Well, no, I think we should talk about it, but I'm leery of passing these singular ordinances when we're getting ready to put in an overlay, because to me, it's not efficient if we passing these things and then just change them when the main city plan comes into action, and that the singular ordinances that we pass after that should fit the main one somewhat. You know, with differences based on what properties that the ordinances then would impact. Does that make sense? Versus changing the sign ordinance. The 281 overlay passes. Now this sign up ordinance is null and void.
Sure.
So that would be my only comment about moving into all these little ordinances and changing things that we really need. Because we discussed the signs that whole year
Yeah, too big one.
in that overlay. So I feel like the city spent a ton of money on it, plus time, plus a committee that the city council needs to move forward and do something on it than just sit there because the money then is wasted.
Do you think there's appetite?
Yeah, I'm jumping on it. So what I suggest tonight is you talk about the things that you want and don't want, and don't worry about, you're not gonna pass anything tonight, okay? So I would really focus on the things that you, for example, you like the fact that the largest sign you can have is 64 square feet, and you do, and you don't. You like, different things about the signs. Think about that specifically. To answer your question, tomorrow at council, we're gonna actually talk about the 281 overlay in two different areas. One is gonna be specifically on whether the council wants to continue moving forward with it, and also they're going to talk about funding. So there's two different things. Sometimes you can fund something and still not move forward, and sometimes you can, you can decide to fund it. Anyway, so we're actually going to definitively, the council definitively tell you if 281 overlay will continue, because we're looking at funding, and then also have an agenda item specifically talking about whether we're moving forward.
So I think part of your point is it's still relevant to talk about it because whatever we talk about could still be put into that versus this and vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, for example, if the 281 overlay does not happen, or if it's put on the back burner, or somebody did all the work that the public did and the groups did, that information will still be compiled, but it just won't get approved this year. But the work that you do will move forward to council, and I would say at least portions that will get approved. So I say the work that you're doing right now is still important, because whatever happens with 281 overlay, I suspect it's going to have some issues. I'm just saying that, right? But we'll do the work.
Because we did signs of overlay.
Yes.
That whole year and all the workshops and all the, we sort of already did all that.
But I think tomorrow you'll know what's happening.
Okay.
I can't say that. but-
That garage east sign that was taken down, was that taken down because it didn't meet the code?
So I think it was taken down before I became the administrator, and I think that the feeling at the time was that it didn't meet the requirements.
So that's why I was about it. I feel like things need to be cleaned up a little bit just for businesses in town. And there are other businesses that aren't going to be included in the overlay. So I just really like to go through and maybe tweak some things, do a little housekeeping. And then later on, if the overlay happens, then we could be more detailed about what those differences might be. That's just my thoughts.
Well, I think whatever we talk about now can be applied to the overlay. So if we go to the overlay, then we apply these things. If we don't go to the overlay, then we apply these things. And so,
Question, who's on the overlay committee doing that?
well, it's really up to council now to decide whether or not that is forward.
And they're kind of in the same opinion of trying to simplify more or less so it's understandable. So I guess I would assume kind of try to work with both parties and doing it. What's all this done? Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's mixed opinions and we'll see kind of where they view it. I think some people are of the opinion we need a master plan before we do anything else, and some people think that the overlay is a good addition, whether it takes over for a UDC or not, or just sits on top of it. But I think they're working through that. Is that fair? I mean,
So the land plan is going to be there tomorrow night as well, but remember, it's statutorily has to go back to the planning commission. You make a recommendation, they believe you haven't yet. Tell me if I'm wrong, okay?
yeah, we
And then,
have.
so you'll need to do that, and then the council would then make a decision. But if the council decides not to fund it, then it dies on the line. So statutorily, you still have to review it and then make a recommendation.
So from that standpoint, did anybody read through the sign ordinance? Did y'all go around and look at signs? Where's everybody kind of feeling? Do you think that this ordinance does a good job, or do you think there's tweaks that need to be made? I don't know, that my opinion is a little bit different.
Well, in my opinion, I think it'd be easiest to just kind of go down like what age description is like on the discontinued signs, that was confusing to me. A responsible party shall remove any sign that advertises a business or project that has ceased operations in excess of 1 year. That seems like a long time to me. But then it says unless the property is leased, in which case the sign shall be removed after 2 years. So a property that was leased and the bit that went out of business, they can keep an old sign up for 2 years, but that just doesn't make sense to me. Why would we allow that?
Fair enough.
So just stuff like that is, I feel like needs to be cleaned up.
And that one I marked too, that we should shorten the time from 6 months for the cease business and then 1 year.
Like, I could do something.
Yeah, I mean, I think it should be shortened too.
Are there any signs questionably historic in town that might want to be preserved? I mean, you can have a business like Healthy, you see that's everywhere, where businesses change, but they keep up old signs because of, the history of the business or legacy. So,
Maybe put something in that says that the historical commission can approve it to be,
but the historical commission only covers the historic district.
Correct, so that it would say just apply through us.
Yeah.
but like the water place that's going out of business, if they, they're a little blue sign up for 2 years, I mean, it just looks tacky to me. And then they don't maintain the sign, and then we don't have anybody who's, citing it up because their sign got weeds growing all over it, and it's all nasty looking, like.
Okay. I
What,
agree with that.
one of the things that I saw in looking at this, there's a lot of signs that are not in compliance around town.
Yes.
And so if it's not something that's gonna be enforced, it seems like a lot of work to go through it line by line and, change things and not have it be enforced.
Well, it's a good point that there are some really nice signs in town that don't comply, but they still have them up. Like, what is the process of how that works?
So they would qualify for non-conforming sign. Okay, and sometimes location. So for example, there was a sign location that I think was whatever on 281. It's a 30-foot setback, but it only set back 10 foot. And they had a sign there, and because they just replaced the blade, and this business allowed the business to change the sign out, and they didn't have to ask for a variance because it was a non-conforming location. So it's a lot of non-conforming signs. Now, the idea is that once the sign breaks down and then basically they have to follow the rules. So we don't let me do base repair on the pole or anything like that. It really has to be completely replaced, like the whole frame and everything. Then we make them comply. But a lot of times people buy a property for whatever is really non-conforming. So if it's a non-conforming use, and that's the problem with most sign ordinances in most towns, is that junky signs were allowed for decades, and then that's why we still have close to the town a couple of billboards. And hardly any city that know a lot of billboards, they're still there to non-conforming. So you can't really get rid of things until they start breaking down. But eventually, the idea is that they will.
Well, what about newer businesses that come in, put in signage that doesn't comply with the code, but is still up? Now, I know a few off the top of my head, I don't really want to say them, but they look nice. And I don't think anybody has a problem with them, but it's just,
So that's why I feel like we're in here, because like, if we think something looks nice and it's not meeting the requirements, like, we should open up the requirements
I
so
agree.
that we can support our businesses, so that we can have nice signs.
that's why I wrote the whole thing up.
So let me say this. If anything that I personally have noticed has been coming up since I got here, I've addressed, okay, as far as I know. And I don't have items on the back of my head, so maybe there's a few I've missed. But anything that got here before I got here, I didn't research to see if it was before the sign off. So I'll be honest there. I've only reviewed things that's the last 18 months or so. So as far as I know, don't embarrass me and say, well, I saw this sign over here. The best to our ability of not having someone to help me, I try to make sure that things I see. But there's probably some signs that shouldn't be there that are not truly non-conforming. But that's part of it.
But I agree with what Julie was saying is there are some very nice signs that don't meet the sign ordinance that I think we should maybe figure out, well, if we like it, why is it not allowed? Now, I know that it's really hard to regulate taste and the appeal of a sign versus not, and some people do a great job and some don't, but I do think there are a few in town that do a really great job that technically don't meet this, and so maybe it's worth talking about what is it that we like about that and how do we put it in to allow businesses the most opportunity to bring in customers and grow their customer base while helping the city and still looking nice.
So the code states now it should be a Texas Hill Country major, should be a color moss, dirt, et cetera. Certain heights, certain setbacks. So if those signs don't fit that, in other words, they're bright blue, neon blue, those kind of colors, I think if you have signs out there that you like that don't conform to the Texas Hill Country, dirt, moss, sand, then in my mind, it would be those two terminologies that then would be changed. Does that make sense?
Were we talking about the actual graphics itself or the actual sign
All of it.
construction?
It just says in here that it needs to fit the Texas Hill Country and be of natural colors, of the natural colors of the, in other words, it shouldn't be a bright neon blue sign.
It shouldn't be a like.
Yeah. And that's the only thing that describes the sign and looks. Everything else is setback, square footage, height, and that. But the only thing that describes a look would be those two items in this code that I saw.
But do we think of pretty blue as that?
Well, I think that you get rid of individuality of the company's marketing and branding itself, and I really think that's tampering with that. If everyone looks in the same 3 or 4 color schemes, you're basically not really gonna know. And yeah, boring for one, but also not really know, well, that stands out, that's that guy's logo, that's this. In all honesty, I've installed quite a few signs, and all the signs I've installed have been with existing structures that were, frames that have been there. And we've got approval just by swapping it out because it's been grandfathered in. So I would say that from what I've seen, 95% of signs have been here for anywhere from 5 to 30, 40, 50 years plus. So I think that we haven't really seen much new growth. Even yours, Julie, there was a sign there before.
Where?
On your real estate office over there. So really, you just kind of put them back up.
No, that was a residential house that never has.
They did it one time. There was a little business there years and years ago. Someone had it there many years ago. But just using that as an example, same with the Dolan Eye Care place, that frame has literally been there forever. It does kind of, you put a sign there, blocks your view a little bit from 281, but your view's already kind of blocked by that tree anyway. So really, it's just for the new ones that really are going up. Simplify it. I don't really care about the color as much as I care about, is it fading, is it brand new, or is it maintained? The sign's not visible, there's really no point having the garbage verbiage up there anyway. So I think that's the time when city manager or someone goes, hey man, we're not trying to be obnoxious, but people want to see your sign and it's looking ratty. Let's get it updated or something. But
I won't say my sign. Because I think it's not what color I need to paint the building. And I want to redo the sign. So I'm like,
you can. That's the thing too. A lot of people don't have it, but replace a sign.
I'm sure.
you said it would be to get this from somewhere else.
Yeah, I think they adopted it from another town and parts of it. So I know I brought this up before, but I just want to reiterate. We talked so much about retaining history in our town, but then we pick and choose what history is valuable. I think we used to have these signs that looked good, but they looked historically fitting, that are by no means legal now. And it's just kind of interesting to me that we draw this hard line on what's legal. It's not allowed here, but yet we try to retain our historical charm by not allowing things that are historical. I get confused by it. And so
I don't know. There used to be a historical district signage ordinance. I mean, there was a sign ordinance specifically for the historical district.
And it still is.
Yeah.
So, for example, I think here it's 10%. You can only have in each window, one little sign, and there's a variety of rules. I'm not, without reading it, I'm not 100% sure, but it's more strict than, you can't do a 64-foot sign or pole sign here in the historic district. So there are different rules.
Which is interesting to me because they're trying to retain the historic look, but they don't want the historic look. So I at least wanted to point it out that it's, in the past, there were some bigger signs, and I don't think a 32 square foot or 64 square foot sign is necessarily big enough or small enough. I think looking at it from the space that the sign sits on is more valuable. One thing I really liked that Brandon Mullane was talking about was measuring out the amount of feet of the front of the business and then doing a square footage based on that. And so we talked about 2 feet per foot or 2 square feet per foot or 3 square feet per foot. And I think that was a very appropriate way to manage it because you can have the larger your building, the larger your sign. That way the sign actually dominates the space and draws attention. I think it's probably worth looking at that concept instead of maxing out 64 square feet as this does, regardless of the size of the building. That would basically require a smaller building, to have a smaller design, a bigger building, or at least a lot.
That's why I brought up that garage use design, because I think everybody really thought that was a precious sign. But it took up the whole wall, which is against the rules, so.
What's that?
You remember the little car, the little convertible car? It was like Play-Doh, and they're like zoom in.
Oh, on the building?
Yeah.
The mural, I thought it was a mural.
Yeah, but it's signed because it was attached. And so.
Yeah, the mural, I think it could have been, I think they removed it as large
It
as
was
64 foot.
Yeah,
So
so
did
something
you
like
know?
that.
I was wondering what happened.
So murals, like, for example, you've got this would be considered a mural, right? 'Cause
That's
it's
painted on the
valid.
Right.
So those, there's no restrictions on those?
I was no, I think it's greater than the 64 foot. Again, but when I review it, I have to make sure I read everything. So,
I think
we need a larger mural than signs 64 foot. Keep on the wall, they only be 64 foot.
I didn't see it in here, but I'm assuming the text dot and their setbacks and regulations, is that in ours? Or is that something that they would have to do as well? Because I know there's a lot of those requirements just being right on 281.
Yeah,
I
there is that in there. I know it does talk about setbacks from the street, but I think it does have to
I
comply
know
with
there
that.
does too.
Very well.
So mural's not mentioned in the code. It
didn't
is
see
not
that.
a definition either.
I didn't
So-
see the requirement.
I had read looking for that. I couldn't
Yeah,
find it.
mural's not in here.
If you tell me it's not, maybe it isn't. Like I said, if I get an application, I'll do a search. I'll do a search of the code, and I'll make sure that, because again, it's hard for me to remember everything, so I can search the code every time someone submits something.
I would love to see a postcard mural somewhere like that. Be super cool. Okay, and then there were other things too, and I mean, I don't know how you're gonna go over this and come back to it, but it was like you're allowed to have one awning. Well, what if you have 3 entrances and you want 3 awnings? You're only allowed to have, I forget what they're called, the kind of the bar and then the sign hangs down, you're only allowed to have 1. What if, you have a couple of doors or whatever, and then I know like the hanging down signs, they have to be 7 feet up. I'm like, well, the pizza place, it's historical, but it's not 7 feet to that hanging sign. So it's just stuff like that that I think that,
Yeah, those old ones are all grandfathered.
Yeah,
Like
but
my
I think
office on
someone-
281, I'm not gonna lie, it's right in my visibility, but I know that I look before I go that way and then I get right to that point. And then that's when I make my commitment.
no, I'm talking about the pizza.
Well, I know
sign.
that, I'm just saying they're grandfathered in, like mine is really low to the ground. Bunch of them are just that way. So really just more of the new cases that are coming up, kind of leave the old ones where they're at. My opinion, the way Remax has it, even the location of Candies, or Red Button, people here that have them on the front, I would say, rule of thumb, let's put it right in the front with the right setback, or on your building, make it simple. Give you two options, you know, up there, or both.
I just don't like the restrictions. I mean, what if someone wants to get really creative and do something really cool? I mean, I guess they could ask for a variance and come show it.
They do.
Yeah, but within reason, you know, we're trying to make it, whether they think it's cool, that's great that you want your sign over here, on this over here, but we need it here so we can actually see your business. And we know what's going on, so really just right out in front, right setback off the road, or if you choose to put it like Oro Bianco up top on the building too. I think building signage is in my opinion, the best. It keeps all the obstruction away from the road. There is no possibility for those lights shining that everyone's trying to not shine up or shine out, but in all honesty, most of them is bright and you can't see the sign anyways.
Well, I'm talking about other, let me see.
I do think that, this should be easy for a business that comes in or somebody wants to build, easier to deal with. No, it's not. And I think in here it states that a reason for variance is if your sign doesn't dominate the space of which it's on, you can apply for variance. I've been on here for like 3 years and I've never had a single person apply. I know.
I just have a sign administrator. So anybody that wants a sign is supposed to talk with the sign administrator, which is supposed to be a city council member, is what it says in this code. Very clear.
That's the first time you signed
Yeah, that's what it says.
Manufacturing.
You're hired. I figured it was you, but it actually says it's a city council member on here, and they're supposed to talk to the sign administrator to get the signs approved before they put them up, or erect them if they've been damaged. And then if they require a variance, they would come.
Well, if you require a sign permit, when you start off with a sign permit, that goes through basically me, and then I'll go through it. And there's a couple of flags, and there's a process that you do through, there's also a process that you don't agree with the sign administrator, or in this case, city administrator. It goes to council, the council can agree to this.
It comes here first.
Right.
If their appeal is here. So, and in my mind, we should keep that because that happened to us on the storage containers. They should have come back here. So that I like in here.
I don't want to
Because
disagree,
we
that's not,
tend to
that's not what the city attorney said, so, but that's,
Then that should be changed in here because it does say the appeal would come here
okay.
first.
And that's fine with signs, but,
Okay,
but the other, that's not what happened.
yeah. One thing I'd like to add is on application, when they come for a variance, that would need to come here and eventually to city council. There's nothing in here that states that, and I don't want to make them have to get a survey, but I think they need to show the setbacks. There is an 8-foot setback from the DOT right away, which all of these signs are out of compliance down this road. So instead of someone trying to do this little hand drawing, we do need something a little better for the application, whether it's the person coming in requesting, or if it's going to be your group as a sign administrator that would actually allocate those requirements for the setbacks in the application. Because it's sort of hard if they just draw a little box and say they want their sign here, and then the sign doesn't truly fit within the code requirements of the setbacks.
But on the simple version, the ordinance is in place and our rules are in place so that we don't have to worry about the setback. I mean, if it says 8 feet and they're not 8 feet, that's a city issue, not a P&D issue.
But when they draw it out, like if they're coming for the variance, like where would they fit in those?
But why do we need to worry about the setback? If it's required?
So one thing to say is, yes, we could probably require to get a CAD drawing, but I wouldn't want to say that it has to be an actual survey.
Right.
I'm trying to make sure
I think
that we
that
don't
would
make
be
it so
too
hard on
expensive.
the applicant.
I agree.
So yes, it could be CAD in the sense that it's AutoCAD, and you can see that it really is 10 foot. But if they don't do 10 foot and we trusted them, and then someone decided to go measure it later on, then they can take it down.
Is that part of the sign permit where they check off that so they know their setbacks?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my point. I don't think we need to worry about setbacks. It's just, it's already required. for Warren, so if they don't comply, then you have to move it, but
Okay.
And you may do move some people.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's here, I may be moving things.
In all honesty, I don't know one brand new sign that's been built. Not here, in the last 2 or 3, 4 years at least, I haven't seen one. It's been finished, stamped and painted, I've actually painted one myself. But I don't know any new ones. I think a good case scenario would be me, when we put in an application, I want to put a sign on Fourth Street property, for instance. What do I need to do, how do I come in and make that a possibility and make it quickly? I want to get one there that's gonna advertise the property, but then maybe it could also be like a public advertisement for other businesses or whatever, kind of like they have at the courthouse, basically.
my whole point is I just didn't think we need to slow down and worry about things like setbacks or parking spaces. Because they're all regulated through the city.
Absolutely.
So just my comment. Pole signs. Thoughts?
Like
Pole and signs of it.
for here, for down here, like you were talking about doing the directionals to the different businesses and stuff.
No, I'm talking about like that's or it's Blanco River, Hotel. The big pole and then a sign on top of it. I think that's, in my mind, I think a bunch of monument signs would look a whole lot better sign on buildings than a bunch of pole signs. I know we've got quite a few of them down the street, but I might be fan, but that's just one man's opinion.
You're not a huge fan?
I mean, I think when you drive through towns that have pole signs all over the left and the right, it doesn't give
They're
the,
not bad. Well, so
no, I'm talking about like a sign with, or
Like a
pole with
Lowe's
sign on
sign.
it.
So they all look like billboards.
No,
As
not
you're
like,
going down, so
I'm talking about the sign on the top of it.
kind of like the Hill Country Liquors is that way up there on a pole. Or like the Lowe's grocery store, there's way up there on a pole.
So what Braden's explaining is sometimes there's signs that are monuments, where it's built on a monument, or sometimes there's sometimes some places require, you can have like 2 poles or like, but not a mono. Some communities consider a monopole kind of like a 1 pole with now sometimes there's 2 little poles. Some people like that better.
So I think you gotta be careful when you call it a pole sign, because this is what pulls up when you get pole sign.
Well,
There's a pole and there's
I
sign.
mean, I think by direct definition, that's a directional sign versus a pole sign. I don't know. But to my understanding, a pole sign is typically speaking of a sign that's on top of a pole.
I think when it comes to any of these signs, it's some look good and some look bad.
Sure.
And you can always find good examples. There's murals that look terrible. And you can always find a good example of something and a really horrendous example of something. So, I mean, I like pole signs, but I hate a lot of them too. So, it's a lot of it comes down to how they're maintained and how they're, and that's something, and how they're designed, and that's something.
I like that, right?
Yeah, the variety is nice, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if y'all remember the consultant that's doing the 281 overlay had the picture of the pole signs that went down the highway from the, yeah, where they're just all, and it just looks like you're coming in and it's just all these billboards and it blocked by leaves and like it was, and some are leaning, some are straight, and so, part of that was to try to do away with pole signs, make the signs a little more consistent and friendly with the buildings versus like way up there. So for me, I'm not a pole sign fan.
Yeah, there's a lot of big trails like.
To me, that picture's bad.
You're talking about something that you can see it from far away down.
Yeah, so it looks kind of like a billboard kind of sign.
What you just
Like a
showed us,
tower.
those look nice, right? If you've got a pole with something off of it, or 2 poles with it in the middle,
Yeah.
or a monument sign, I mean, I think variety is nice.
Well, it depends on the building. I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah,
You also
like
can't-
Lowe's, that calls for a pole sign.
But they could have a really nice monument sign out on the street. I don't
They
think.
have added 2 new monument signs out front for 2 of the folks that are in that strip center. I think there's a contractor and somebody else that put 2 lower signs out front.
Those were one of the original signs. I'm actually one sign on. That's my sign.
Yeah, so those are the newer, look good, we're like,
Well,
all those real
they've been
tall
there
little
for-
signs.
I don't know,
Yeah.
30, 40 years, but
Yeah.
I think coat of stain is nice.
I looked and I said, oh, there's signs that are in sort of compliance, and then there's that real huge star one way up there.
Well, and I think as more businesses come to town, especially over the next 5 to 10 years, this is an opportunity for us to kind of figure out what do we want our town to look like when you drive down the street. And having a little bit more direction instead of taking another town's sign ordinance and just flat out applying it. Like, what do we want? Like, what makes our town look like Blanco, aesthetically pleasing? You drive down and maybe you do have some sign variety, but you don't have these signs that are sitting up in the trees. You got some awning signs, some lower pole signs, some signs on the side of the building. I'm all for giving as much flexibility to the businesses as we can, because at the end of the day, like you said, the business might do whatever they want, but hopefully they're gonna do what they think is gonna bring the most business, which
Yeah,
hopefully is gonna look good, because that's what they want. But
I mean, I personally don't stand when I get inside. I hate it. I hate it.
Which one?
This one I do. Yeah, I hate that. I hate that. I hate it. I hate it.
they like it.
But they like it. And so, I mean, I just go, suck it up, buttercup. Just, it's, that's what they like.
Yeah, I'm okay with that individuality also because it kind of does stand out as not just as uniformity. As long as we're, following the setback requirements and the visibility height requirements and all of that, even the color bright blue versus, the Hill Country colors, I'm okay with a variety just because, we're getting more modern in every town. It's an old school feel with some modern kind of flair. I think the biggest thing is signage. You just actually have something you can read. Golden Eye Care, for instance, that sign, not only was it right there when you're trying to turn, it's hard to see, but it was just the most faded vinyl stuff peeling off of it. I didn't know that business was operating for the first 4 years I moved here. Because he had weird hours, and sure enough, he was there forever. And that just looked run down, And I don't want to tell someone to spend money, but if you're operating a business, you're successful enough, take a little pride in the curb appeal, basically.
I think there is some stuff in here that talks about making sure the sign doesn't
It is.
look run down.
It does.
And sticking to those kind of basics, I think is important and not getting hung up on the colors versus the lit signs that we're talking about with this bright madness going on. I think that can steer your eyes away from, let's say, the old dog. I haven't really seen it at night, but that's just so bright. And the
Well,
other signs,
I don't mind that.
it doesn't. Well, it's perfect. But, case by case for sure, I think is the only way we can go.
I remember when I was first working with missionaries in preservation, the very, very first time, I called Joshua Spear and said, okay, so Bill is that, what is Blanco's style? He said, Blanco's style is Texas has no style.
Okay.
And so that kind of went, all right, that makes sense. He said, it's a big conglomeration of different things, but it fits because it's Blanco. And that's what I've always kept in the back of my mind.
And I think maintaining a reasonable variance process for this, because, anything, we're looking at stuff people, wrote how many years ago? And the town has changed substantially since this was written. But because there's a variance process, it is open to.
One problem with that, that people aren't asking for.
Right, yes.
And so just because it's an easy process or it spells it out here, people look at a sign ordinance and they're like, I'm not allowed to have this, and they move on.
But they have to have a permit, right?
Correct, there's a sign permit.
And so are they, when you go through the process, you have someone that's not compliant, would you let them know the variance process?
Let them know the branch process, you just had one, and this gentleman asked for one, for sure.
We're gonna have that set.
I'm just saying, there is a process, and we've actually had a couple of applications for variances. There's a process.
But the variances don't come to us, they go to staff.
Yes, they go to you, they go to staff first. I think there's been two, but maybe there's only one, I don't remember now, I know there's been one recently.
Yeah, WCR, Lancer, and they got theirs.
That was right before I got here.
Was it?
Right, and then the one that's now the Whitland Hotel, they got that about a year before I got here. But there was a variance for that sign.
So how do y'all feel about electronic signs?
I think there's a time and place for everything, and, you know, I was for the church one, I thought that would be great. There are residences across the street with blaring at, you know, they agreed to keep the, you know, the dim, you know, and conform with the night sky stuff going on, and, you know, they've got a lot of events that they could change and advertise on their sign. You know, like I said, it's not like El Agave having an electric sign out front with margarita specials, you know, on the main road, you know, as you come into town, it's, you know,
Yeah, it faces a commercial building of the school.
Well, the old Valley is actually a drive-through. That's not a, that's.
I think if they put something on the road or whatever. I mean, whatever, but I mean, I was okay with that. Would I want Redbud to have a sign out that, you know, I mean, you can't make it sort of, you know what I mean? Or Shrimpies, you know, having a sign out. I think there's a time and place for everything.
Well, problem with that is city council basically looked at it and said, while this might be fitting, we don't want to make an exception for this one because then we're going to be asked these others. If we're going to allow it, we need to change the ordinance. And so realistically, it'd either be allowed or not allowed.
And there was, reading about the sign ordinance back in 2015, this was actually, they put this in place pretty well intended. It was on the news, local news, about the churches being upset about it because they can't have those signs. So yes, if looking back at that, if the Baptist church were to be given a sign to the Baptist church, we want one, and every church owns one, and that's a fair amount.
Which with requiring them not to be scrolling signs, or not be brighter than a certain thing, or dimming at night, maybe not be a bad thing. I'm not saying one or another, but I think it's at least we're talking about because yes, there's a time and a place, but we can't choose the time and the place. So it's either let's suggest they add it in to allow it or not. But I think certain instances it does make sense. And I was completely for it at that church, but I get the argument at city council. So
I mean, I just don't see how you can, I mean, the baseball field lights up with the bright everything. What's that gonna do? You know, the Methodist church, well, I mean, I think I see it right across the street, but I just think it conformed with the space.
Also, too, what they're advertising is important dates versus a margarita. If you don't know that it's a margarita, the place that says bar and grill, then I think that they're not doing their business right. They have terrible margaritas. I think it really is, even for the city, you know, out here, I wouldn't mind one on 281 that would be put in the planning and zoning meeting, flashing, the next city council flashing. That would be really helpful information you would only get out of the convenience out of an electric sign. So I think it really should just be the case by case, and if someone doesn't like it, well, sorry. You know, I mean, I think that's the whole point of what we're doing here is offering variance where it makes sense. And if someone is really that intent on having that sign for a reason, which we haven't had one yet, sign the church, I think it's, I don't know, they're just gonna have to suck it up, buttercup.
That's right.
Because at the end of the day, we're not doing it to spite their business, but there's many options to advertise that there's also variances for that reason. For the church, it's a chore. I've done those signs before. And the way they blow it off and then you have the false information up there, it's pointless. But getting that advertisement out there, that's important. I think it's better than someone trying to look for something versus it's right there and it changes when it needs to, you know?
well, we've got quite a few of those, what are they called, change copy signs? The ones where you go up and you change the letters on them. I don't even know what you call this thing.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I personally think electric is better than those kind of signs. I think we need to evolve. That's my personal feeling. I did want to make one mention though. I think his point is taken because there are some communities and some planning commissions and councils that don't like variances. But the good thing about variances is that you know, things change over time. Let's put it this way: councils and city administrators and planning commission change a lot more often than, as you know, ordinances. So if we have a good variance procedure in here, You may have a council later on that believes in variance a little bit more. So I would say, yeah, focus on your variance. You know, because, it could, it's worthwhile. I tend to like variances because I believe in having relatively strict ordinances, and then it's case by case basis. Some communities don't feel that way. But anyway, but as far as the letter that I got, I'll put your call with that.
Okay.
So,
Well, so we've got quite a few of them around town. I can think of at least three off the top of my head, and I'm assuming more of the churches have those that I haven't quite noticed, but I think the electronic signs look nicer than the ones that have been up for 30 years that are starting to fall down. And you have somebody going out there dealing with it. But we don't have a city council right now that has an appetite for necessarily a variance on this stuff. They say, we're gonna make the exception, let's change the ordinance. Now, I think in the direction of, I think variances are the best tool we have, but that's not where we're at on this. So it's, do we think that that's something that should be in the sign ordinances to allow the electric signs that don't scroll or not?
I think so,
Uh-huh.
because in all honesty too, you're gonna have less people doing the electronic ones because of how expensive they are. It's not a normal business cost that someone wants to incur unless it's really beneficial for their business, and they're expensive. It's not a cheap thing, you know, so I think you're gonna have less people trying to do that, but at least having an option for case by case, like you do the same and whatnot, or I think it's important.
Or could we just leave it for the churches? Because like some of the other ones in there were like, schools can only do this, the city can only do this, why can't the churches only do that? I mean, you could put stipulations on who can, how to do electric signs.
I think that could pose potential problem there, the way it was doing. That's not a government entity like schools are, or it's a, you know, I don't know. It doesn't seem right to me to allow churches to do it, but not somebody's business. You know, they wouldn't incur the cost. But, and I would also, as when the pastors came in and proposed that they were adamant about dimming it and proposed that, I think that's keeping the lighting at a certain level that does kind of keep in the spirit of the night sky. But when you've got 6 of those, what kind of difference does that make? The overall light.
Is anybody willing to read something out loud? I'm terrible at reading out loud. Can you read this? This is a letter that I got from Heinz. Who used to be on this commission, but has recently left us, but he sent me that yesterday.
My name is Heinz Rush, and I live in Cielo Springs, and thereby are a water customer of the city of Blanco. I apologize for not attending in person today due to a prior commitment. It is my understanding that the Planning and Zoning Commission at its meeting this evening will consider and discuss updates to the city sign ordinance. My comment for today are that the sign ordinance update should include, among others, provisions to allow the use of electronic signs within reason, while respecting the dark skies designation of the city of Blanco. The city already has a plethora of electronic signs, open/closed. Some of them are even flashing or build the text letter by letter. ATM, vapor. Gas stations years ago were allowed to virtually gas stations years ago were allowed in virtually every city, including Blanco, to display their gas prices with electronic signs, and thereby were spared the unsafe practice of climbing ladders or maneuvering along poles to replace the numbers. The library has an electronic sign, and one business has a small rolling banner type electronic sign. Even our venerable police department avails itself of a moving electronic sign that by its very nature is designed to attract the attention of drivers to bring their speed to within the posted speed limit. No sensible person today would take offense at such signs. In fact, I think Blanco city ordinance needs to be updated to permanent electronic signs within reason. I urge you to allow the use of electronic signs. It could replace the manual signs of an identical nature many businesses and organizations already have in place. This would allow them to safely and timely inform the public of what is going on in a particular business or organization. Thank you, commissioners, for your outstanding and exemplary service to the city of Blanco.
I think he's got a point.
Sorry, I forgot to read that earlier, but I think it was an appropriate time for it.
And I don't mean,
I think we're worried about it turning into Las Vegas and that's just not out there.
Well, you need to- no flashing and no scrolling.
Yeah.
And then adjustable dimmers for night or whatever. We can regulate that portion of it. Okay, so,
Ask one question.
sure, one question.
I don't know what you're supposed to look like. When on behalf of First Baptist Insurance, applied for the sign permit, they granted it. And I found out I had to apply for a variance, and the city council, as you all know, they rejected it. I understand their logic. And I'm not here representing the church to stubbornly keep pushing for electronic sign. What I'm trying to do is figure out if, I understand the small town mentality. We want to keep, the old signs are kind of cool where you change the letters. I get that. I respect that. But also, at the time, after the city council meeting where they turned down our variance request, I went back online and saw a newer version of the sign ordinance that I had not seen before. And that said that you're supposed to have a roof built over your sign so it doesn't shine out. And I had not seen that before. And so actually in our specific case, I'm not even sure, we just want to move forward with a new sign where we can do changeable letters. One that's, ours is worn out, or electronic, but we're not gonna hee-haw and brave for an electronic sign if it's not in the stars. So we would respectfully request that the city council, I know you're P&Z, I understand, but, that we could have a final decision on whether or not this type of electronic sign will be permitted. And if not, if they're not gonna permit it, we understand respectfully, we're not gonna argue and replace our existing changeable letter sign with a newer one that's more functional.
Well, it sounds like most of us are in agreement. I know we've got a lot of other things on this ordinance to get through, but it seems like at the end of this, we'll probably recommend the city council to change that portion of it, and then it'll be up to them, so.
But that'll be on an agenda for a couple of meetings.
It'll be a while,
in the
then,
future.
yeah, because we've got okay, this is just for conversation, then we've got probably another conversation, then we got to vote on it, then we got to city council, and they got to, yeah, so I mean.
I would say October.
Sure, that bad.
And with the electronic signs, what you need to understand is you need to then scratch that you want Texas Hill Country natural looking signs. That needs to be taken out because it doesn't fit together. And with those signs, when you put rules on them, I feel like you need to put rules on them with the thought process every single person will have one. And that's how you still, yeah, but you can't just say, oh, only one person's gonna get one or two, because once it is allowed, that means everybody can have one. So if you're gonna do electronic signs for the whole town, we need to put some rules on them. So like you don't want them, in my mind, you wouldn't want it up on a pole. You're gonna allow pole signs, like, potentially it would need to be encased in a monument, no flashing. They can turn off at a certain time at night. However you're gonna do it, I just feel like the electronic signs for all would need to have a little bit of rules wrapped around them. Because if you envision all of a sudden now Red Bud sign can be up there. Assuming it's not gonna happen, because whenever you pass an ordinance that it's allowed, you have to look at that ordinance, as everyone's gonna want it. And if we could potentially set some rules on it,
Yeah.
so it doesn't get too out of,
The beautiful thing about our town is a big chunk of the town is the historic district.
Yeah.
And nothing that's not at risk. So we're gonna have this nice area. Yeah, out by, Lowe's, you might see more out there, but you already have those signs out there. So,
Yeah, I think the rules are already in here for the sign regardless. As far as the color, I don't think it's the logo as much as you're talking about. I don't mind keeping Hill Country colors as far as the frame. So if you want to do a bright neon yellow, caution yellow, or red, fire hydrant color, the actual sign structure itself, keep those in a rustic thing, or wrapped in cedar, or do something that is. But I would say all the rules are already in here for your requirements of the heights and the setbacks. So really it's just a square box, electric versus one that has a banner or, you know, a vinyl wrap or something. I think the point of this is to simplify it. I think we just need to either simplify it or don't. And as the cases come by with the permitting process, that's where the hound dog comes into like, no, absolutely not. You're asking for a 20-foot tall billboard sign lit up with spotlights and you want neon yellow and everything else. And don't get me wrong, there's gonna be some people that want that, and I'm sure there's gonna be people that are gonna fight it, but I really think just simplifying it. You know, you have a diagram of this is your property, the setback rules, but yeah, that's part of the permit form with requirements of your colors, and then within that, your freedom of the logo and your own art that you have on your sign.
So like where it says that all the signs are gonna be natural earth tones, they're gonna be muted, they're gonna be flat, they're gonna be natural colors, they're lost trees. I mean, there's where you probably wanna put like no neon or, you know, qualify a little bit more if you have a bunch of electronic signs starting to pop up.
Yeah, I think that's talking about the construction of the sign itself,
Yeah.
the actual framework and, you know, contracted building or a metal fabricating.
I do think it's a little bit too specific on colors, both personally.
Yeah.
I don't think pretty blue or pretty red is
Right.
necessarily bad. I don't think it needs to be flat, dark earth to be appropriate.
And I've never realized that that was the Hill Country colors.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right now, it's
It
burnt
doesn't
and
sound
charred and
attractive.
dry. Yeah. Great.
A little color would be nice.
Julie,
Cigarette ash.
So I just wanted to bring this up because during Lavender Fest, it was coming to my attention. So for example, you know, we can't have the feather flags, which I know the burger place has the feather flags, like who would know there's hamburgers there except they have the feather flags. I think they should be allowed during business hours. I think they should be allowed to go up and down so that we know what the businesses are. We have a lot of tourists. They would see the feather flag and know that, hey, you know, like the RV park, they have breakfast stuff all day long. Yeah, they don't take them down. I think they should be taken down, but like, for Lavender Fest, you know, Fairview was trying to figure out how to get people's attention, and feather flags, you know, would have been great for them because they weren't gonna do a trailer down there or whatever. So I just want to look at some of the things that aren't allowed, maybe make them temporary just to support our businesses so that people will know that their business is there during business hours. So those are some other things that I wanted to address.
And there's some, you know, there's also some things in the residential that kind of don't really, like I mentioned the last time, because it is a business, these big signs, these big temporary signs for people's birthdays, their, you know, graduation or whatever it is, and these giant temporary signs that go in people's yards, and, you know, these are people that are investing in these, and they are actually, you know, against the plan.
I don't think, because I was trying to look at that, because I was looking at the flags and then I was like, okay, can you have a Waco Panthers flag? Yes, you can have one flag that's not an American flag. I was trying to look at all that too, because I was like, well, what if I wanted to put up a, you know, football flag during football season? Can you do that?
Oh my
I
God.
was trying to look at the
I think in here it says you can have one
One
flag
flag,
that is not
not
in Texas or in America.
flag.
I do think it has some sort of.
But it had to be like Marines, Air Force, like it had to be,
You can have like an open sign, you can have a blanket Panther sign, or a flag, I don't remember where that is in there, but there is some specification on that.
so just those kind of things I'd like to look at.
Sure. What else, anything else?
Yeah, those signs are actually the most visible in my opinion. That's kind of cool. If they're taken up and down, not just blowing over on the ground, all, you know, throughout the weekend or whatever else.
I don't mind the feather flag, my only hesitation on it is like when listening, what if every business puts them out, then I think it'd be a little ridiculous. How do you manage that part of it, but.
Is the burning festival going on?
There were some outdoor market days, or maybe it was Lavender Fest, whatever those were outdoor, and they looked fine, I wasn't opposed to it.
And the festival is different
Sure.
than every day that we serve. use, but I also feel like Blanco is spread out, it's not like.
Yeah.
You know, we're not on the main street where everything could get, you know, gaudy. I think we are spread out.
Ma'am?
Sure.
So a point that Lynn is making, and she made in a different fashion last time, and she pointed out to me, was that like, there's a couple of electronic signs that are in the county, which is outside of our purview. One was Apache, I believe. The new liquor store.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so after you mentioned that, I drove out there to look at those specifically, and that's just two. Yeah, I personally find it distracting, just two next to each other.
I
So,
think,
and I think it's a-
flashing,
Yeah, the
because
flashing
it's so
style.
dark, you know, at night, I think, because the
Yeah.
liquor store is flashing is why it's like so, and because there aren't really electronic signs up here, so you certainly do notice that one. What, for me, like, I don't want us to look like south of 46 on Lower Verde, so I sort of feel like the more we're, you know, let everybody do what they want. That, you know, that all of a sudden now we sort of look like that stretch from 46 to Boardfield where, you know, signs were. And I just hope that we lean a little more toward our historic nature. And I think it's better for property values and quaintness that people want to come visit on the weekends and we don't get to, you know, big pole signs, flashing signs, you know, bunch of flags, or, you know, I'm just hoping that we sort of stay a little bit more quaint.
Which makes me think that or not. Why I'm picking on. But the El Agave, you know how, if y'all seen their picture of their food in the window, like, I think I was reading that that's not allowed.
But that isn't allowed. They also have not received a permit yet to operate.
Yeah.
Well, everyone said the food was great.
Did they open? 'Cause I noticed the traffic built up at like 5:30, there was
Yeah.
people trying to get out around that.
They don't have to see it.
Yeah, so I think that stuff like that makes it kind of cheap.
Well, I agree with you, and the ordinances, unfortunately, you have to kind of rein it in because of the craziness. And that Apache sign, for instance, it's not the brightness as much as that the text is so quickly flashing, I can't read nothing on it. And if I really want to start reading it, I'm not going to be looking at the road either. So I think the delay between flashing from your advertisement to your sign, you know, you can set that however you want. You literally have it can just be stroking. So I think for sure that needs to be like, hey, you know, so you guys try not to do a 20-second delay between something because it is very distracting.
I wanted to hear the liquor store.
Yeah, and I know how to drive, so I'm not, you know, if Applebee's there,
Yeah.
but for someone that really is looking for a business and they are really paying attention, it can be distracting for sure.
Are they on the ETA? Is it-
No, they're still far out of it.
No, they don't need to change that.
But a lot of this does include the end of ETA.
Yeah, we have, let me say this is about the ability versus what the city really does. The city has the right to look at signage within the ETJ, which is half mile, but the truth is, these are just within the city. I mean, yes, we have the ability to look at signage in the ETJ, but most towns don't. And so, you know, if you complain to me about something, so that's an ETJ can deal with it, I would, but I'm generally not looking at that. I'm looking at what's in the city limits. I don't know, Brandon, did you want to, she's still been on there. I don't know if Kathleen had any questions. You wanted to mention anything, but if you guys, you can always speak up.
Yep, I'm here.
There she is.
Sorry, I'm in Virginia. It was a.
I think you're muted.
You're muted.
Oh, can y'all not hear me?
Maybe not yet. Okay. Let me see if I can, maybe not. Sorry about that.
Catch you back in the chat.
Yeah, so can you hear me now?
No, we can't. I'm
We
sorry.
have participants muted in the settings.
Yeah,
We're trying to see if it's on our end.
it's on your end.
Let's see if that works.
Can you hear me now?
Nope.
No,
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay.
Maybe not. Sorry about that.
okay. All right, the main thing is I want us to kind of start thinking about things and take what you heard tonight and go do some more looking, and we can try to put a bunch of stuff down on paper, by probably maybe in the next few meetings whenever we don't have a busy agenda, but I don't think tonight lasts too long. Anybody have any other thoughts that they want to get out there for us to start talking about?
One, just, I don't know if this is reasonable or not, but, you know, especially sharing with pictures, you know, those are really the kind of signs that are, you know, really fantastic, people love. And we have a business and a city have two different goals when it comes to signage. The business wants to attract attention and get us, you know, get what their business is out there as much as possible. And the city wants to keep things nice and not be gaudy or, you know, whatever. Is there a way to, rather than restrict, to incentivize? So, you know, as you talk about, these are art, signs can be art, and not just, and they're a benefit to a community when they're done that way. But they don't always promote business the way that the business needs it to. So a business could make a sign that makes the city better, but at a greater cost to themselves. So is there any way to, when it comes to these kind of things, like I said, instead of restricting, to incentivize? And so you do limit people, like the church says, no, we really want our electric sign. Okay, that's fine. But instead of preventing the guy down the road from having it as well, finding a way to incentivize him to make a sign that's better. Does that make any sense? I don't know. I'm just wondering, I have to think that cities have done this. And I was just wondering, you know, whether it's reduced fees or, I don't know, if fees are low enough in this town, it's probably not much, even if that's it. But I'm just wondering if, having been in other towns and in your knowledge and education in this area, or I know other cities do incentivize, I just don't know how to do it.
I can look into it. I mean, I don't know. I've only been really, I guess I've been in a few cities, and I'm trying to think the last one. We actually allow a lot more stuff in this one, yeah,
I think what you can do is you could have some artists that would donate their work for free. And then based on the rules within the code of what signs or murals would be allowed, they could do submissions, and then they could do their signs for free for businesses
That were willing.
And part of that would be they could sign their artwork, which would then be an advertisement for them. So you could not only have more art signs, you could get free signs for the business, you could get then the advertising for the artists, and it wouldn't cost anybody any money but giving that artist the rules, and then handing them out and see which businesses would want to participate. Potentially, let's say someone like has a pole sign, potentially like a liquor store. They could take down their pole sign, have it replaced with a mural that could be given to them for free, because the artist then would have the advertising of the sign work with their little scan website emblem at the bottom. So I mean, you could do that.
I've seen a couple of towns that do that, and from my recollection, they still have the gaudy signs, but the other signs are murals, and kind of sets a tone that people don't want to deviate from. And
I would say your biggest incentive is gonna be less restrictions, because then people are actually gonna be putting up new signs because they're letting them do it. Now, obviously, since Warren's been here, the process has been easier, despite it being very convoluted in here. 5 years ago, even going further back, good luck getting the sign put up. Norman Fox was the city code enforcer, and he was good at his job. He enforced the code very well, and no one put signs up. And when they did, they were taken down very quickly. So I think overall, just making it easier for people to understand what is the requirements. I think that's an incentive in itself. You know, waste, the amount of time he's had to spend just coming to the meeting to get his electric sign approved, it's time out of his, it's very labor intensive to get a sign approved, or has been for the years.
I think I'm gonna promote the Wimberley, because I'm just trying to think, when I was in college, I worked at Wimberley, and I can remember them shooting out neon signs if someone tried to put them up. Like, we did Wimberley a lot, we have been in Wimberley, and I'm trying to think, like, it's not gaudy there. It's very quaint, small town, Texas feel. I can't think of one neon sign, everything's like metal or wood, cut out artwork type sign, so I'll look at that and try to compare it to what's going on. Find it.
Yeah, I like Wembley signs. Does anybody have anything else that they want to bring up on this? My thought is maybe next meeting, depending upon how much is on the agenda, I really don't want to throw this in. We have long meetings already, but maybe go through and highlight 3 things you don't like and write down 3 things that you'd like to see different. If all of us do that, I think maybe it simplifies this.
And then maybe we have a committee to get together and put them all together.
Sure.
So they're not here for.
We can only have 3 of us together to do that though. Right?
So one of the things I didn't want to mention is, one of the items in the council tomorrow night is funding of actually to hire Brandon Milan to be your planner, to kind of guide you a little bit. I'll still be here, but that is one of the items that may or may not pass and that is actually on. So if it does pass, you'll get a little bit more, a little different standpoint. I'm more pure planner than I am. I worked for an engineering company for 10 years. I was more on the side of on the business side, but you might move more pure planner. And we'll see if that passes the budget.
So they're talking about bringing this like 5 hours a week.
Yeah, it'd be 5 hours. 5 hours a week. And that would be the funding, 5 hours a week. And then there's also the discussion of the 281 overlay. So both of those items are on the agenda tomorrow. So, that would be more helpful to you. Let's say it passes. That is something one of the councilmen wanted to try to help you, guide you a little bit.
Okay, it'd be nice to have somebody that actually knows what they're doing, helping us do all this stuff. The side thing in this new one you just gave me? No. That is the UDC, and then the ordinances are separate. So do we want to get a committee together to talk about this? Anybody interested? No?
Of course I do.
I'm interested, I'm gonna say the same thing I've been saying. Simplify it.
And
So I
they
think
send
like,
the notes that
she's put a lot of input, she's put some good input, pretty good input. I trust their judgment if they're willing to do that, because I'm literally just gonna say, give me a thing that says 1 through 20 is all I need to do, not 40 pages. That's what I'm gonna say.
Alright,
Because I'm a contractor and I deal with permitting, and half the time it's like, I'm asking for a permit to do something I already know how to do. But just the steps to get there is very pain. So I don't wanna come across as,
Well, so I suggest that, so if we had our committee and whoever wanted to put in notes of things that concern them, they could put them into the committee could look at it and organize everything, put it all together, and then we could send it out beforehand, people could read it, and then that way when we come back, we could just come up with the concerns.
So, Marissa, Julie, anybody else want to join them? That I will join y'all if you want.
Kathleen said, Kathleen makes her.
Oh, you want to? Okay. All right, we'll have Kathleen join the 2 of y'all. There's only the 3 of us. And then we can just give y'all notes and y'all can work on it as you can.
So what are we submitting our 3 likes and dislikes?
Well, I think, I think, I was saying that just for our next meeting, but if we're gonna get a group together, then we can just submit them. Whatever thoughts that you think should be in there, or things that you think should be there, and then they can dive in and work on it. Does anybody have anything else they want to go? Okay, we'll call this meeting adjourned. It's 7:04.
Thank you all for, I wouldn't want to do this.